Welcome in, everybody, and it's another Seminoles Sidelines here from the Osceola. Arya Masudi, Bob Ferranti, and a really action-packed weekend for Florida State athletics. Charles Fishbein will join us, our recruiting analyst, in just a moment to talk about a big recruiting weekend for Mike Norvell in Tallahassee. Weekend 2 of 3 that are back-to-back-to-back that are going to be really important for the Seminoles as they try and build the relationships with the 24 and 25 classes. We'll also talk about men's hoops. How about what Leonard Hamilton has done? Despite all the adversity, it's been impressive, to say the least, to watch them continue to fight. And it hasn't been pretty always, but they've won 2 ACC games in a row on the road, and that's not easy to do. So we've got a good show packed for you here this afternoon. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate it. On Twitter, on Facebook, comment, and we will try and give you a shout out here. And then, of course, we're always available on demand on Apple, on Spotify, on your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Subscribe to theosceola.com. We've got a lot of specials going on and things that will help you get acquainted with us well as we move through football season, the off season, I should say, and moving into the 2023 season. So, Bob, without further ado, let's get started on the show. This has been a cool off season, I think, for the Noles, not just in terms of getting guys to come back, but the hype that's been building. Jared Verse got named to ESPN's way too early All-American team earlier this year on that first team.
Yeah, I think Jared, if you were creating a list of the guys that you most wanted to come back, I think Jordan Travis, Jared Verse, Johnny Wilson in some order would be pretty high up there. Of course, you got to have the quarterback to win in this era of football. But you also have to have a guy who puts pressure on the quarterback right now, and that's what Jared Verse has done. I think we debated this throughout the year. Was Jared Verse a potential FCS to Power 5 and a one and done, or did he need a second year to really be able to fulfill his dreams, to be I think he would admit he wants to be a first-round draft pick. He wants to be a guy that the NFL teams want. And his resume is really impressive as a pass rusher. It also includes some time where he was injured. And he will tell you he needs to improve on being a better run defender. He needs to take a lot of steps in his career. He can do that for Florida State. He can be a leader. He is that fun guy in the locker room, on and off the field for the Seminoles. I think Jared Verse will be definitely one of those guys who we see as one of the top ACC defensive players going into 2023. Like ESPN has said, a preseason All-American type. Jared's really impactful, what he can do. I think we're all looking forward to what's the next step. What's the next step in his progression? He likes to work. He likes to work hard. He brings a ton of energy out there. What's next for him? We're all kind of looking forward to what's next.
Yeah, I think this offseason for him is really big, in terms of getting in that weight room with Josh Storms. And it's not that Jared's a small guy. By no means is Jared a small guy. But when you looked at him and like Jermaine Johnson, there's a difference in the physique that allows you to take on a full season of blocks, makes you better in the run block game, maybe makes you more of a consistent force on a down-to-down basis. And Jared was great in passing downs. He's got a great motor. He's very fast, twitchy athlete. But that's, I think, an area that I think even he would agree, getting a little bit bigger and stronger to be able to withstand, because he did get washed out of the play, I would say quite a bit at times last season, especially in the run block game. And so he's going to continue to get better. I think, we're not saying that that's a problem. We're saying that that's going to be the next step that takes him, when we're talking about a guy who's going to be maybe end of the first round, second round pick, to a surefire top 10, the way Jermaine Johnson kind of darted up the draft boards. This season's going to be huge for him in terms of showing that. And of course, I think some more pass rush moves too for Jared would be something that could complement his game, make him all around. And again, I think he would tell you that too. Like, I think he would say, I'm coming back to become this complete package, and I want to be a top 10 pick, because that money in the top 10, man, that's it's not just life-changing. That's, laugh out loud money, if you know what I mean. And so looking forward to seeing what Jared does. The Noles have gotten better, I think, too, on the D-line around him, that I think it will benefit Jared going forward, because you can't game plan on just stopping Jared. Pat Payton's development going to be huge. The way McClendon played, the guys in the middle, I think, are going to absorb some blocks as well and take some attention away from what Jared Verse can do. We'll see what Fiske does as well, right? Like when he comes in, what can he provide in the pass rush game that allows Florida State to be a complete package? And so Jared Verse, though, a lot of hype. ESPN thinks he's going to be pretty good. I think we all are on the same page that Verse has first-team All-American potential and will be a catalyst for that Seminole defense. Bob, we've been talking to transfers all week. I think we get to do that 2 more times this week, Tuesday and Thursday. Give us a primer on some of the guys that we're going to have a chance to hear from this week.
Yeah, looking forward to these interviews because you get to know not just the process. Why did you transfer? How did you pick Florida State? Why did Florida State stand out? I think the obvious answer from a lot of these guys, it's relationships. They built that with Mike Norvell and the assistant coaches. But, Florida State has picked up a lot of impactful transfers. Like you mentioned on the defensive line, we'll get to talk to Gilbert Edmond on Tuesday and Kyle Morlock, the kind of little known transfer from Shorter College, the tight end, a guy who nobody really knew about a couple of months ago. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted him from Florida State to Tennessee. Why did he pick Florida State? And then, yes, like you mentioned, Braden Fisk from Western Michigan. We'll get to talk to him on Thursday. I know he came in with an injury. How is he doing? What's his kind of prognosis, short-term, long-term? Will he be able to get on the field in the spring or not? And then, I think also Keandre Jones from Auburn will be one of the Thursday interviews. So yeah, I think what Florida State has done successfully in the transfer portal, pick up guys on the offensive line and the defensive line. Also pick up some guys who are multi-year impactful transfers. We saw what a Dylan Gibbons offered. We saw what a Jamie Robinson offered. So Mike Norvell has really, I think, looked for fit, but also looked for leadership, production, and yeah, it's great to have a Jermaine Johnson, a one-year guy who's just incredibly impactful, but also who can be a multi-year guy. Fabian Lovett, perhaps no better example than a guy who left Mississippi State really early on in his career and has found a longer home in Tallahassee than he was even in Starkville. So that's what's kind of cool about the transfer portal is it's not just a 1 or 2 year guy. It can be a long-term piece. And yeah, Fabian Lovett, Jared Verse, Daryl Jackson, Braden Fisk, Patrick Payton, you keep naming them, that rotation, that depth. That's what's going to make that Florida State defensive front so good in this fall.
Yeah, looking forward to it, no doubt. And we've got a lot of time to talk about what Florida State will look like defensively. Spring practice, it'll be here before you know it. Right now, the Noles are going through their tour of duty and just getting, conditioning and getting right, building the mentality. I thought it was important for them last year, that tour of duty, so to speak, where they built the culture and the pillars that allowed them to be successful. And remember, it was their first really full offseason to be able to be together, to implement the infrastructure of what they want their program to be. And again, we saw it this season, right? Florida State did such a good job when it counted, especially in the back half of the season, of staying together and being able to withstand some teams. We saw it in the final few games of the year, especially against Florida and Oklahoma. And no doubt that gets built in the offseason. You don't build culture during a season. That doesn't happen. They often say you win titles in the offseason. And so that's what Florida State's trying to do. And they will continue to do that. I know you see I'm wearing a Jags shirt. I got a text from a buddy that goes, feeling confident today. And I'm like, tough loss for the Jags. They played well. I think they earned some respect. They made too many critical errors in that fourth quarter to win at at Arrowhead. You don't have to play perfect per se. And certainly I thought Mahomes being out was big, for Jacksonville. But when Henne drove them down and got a touchdown, you kind of had that feeling that, all right, this is going to be a tough day for the Jags. And I thought the Chiefs did a good job of, especially when Mahomes came back in, they got the job done. And so fun NFL weekend. We had some really good games throughout the weekend. Couple of snoozers too. It wasn't all smooth sailing. The Giants really weren't competitive against the Eagles, and I think a lot of people thought that they had a shot to be. So there's your quick NFL talk in the middle of the show. As Charles Fishbein joins us, Osceola's recruiting analyst. And Fish, appreciate you joining us. It was another big weekend for Mike Norvell. Can you kind of take us through some of the guys that were on campus for FSU this weekend and where Florida State's looking as they continue to try and build relationships for that 24 and 25 class?
And
Charles, I think I think your mic might be out.
do you hear me now?
There you are.
All right. Now I was just talking about, you're not going to leave me out of the NFL conversation.
Come on, no, give us your takes. We want
my Dallas Cowboys, man. Once again, Dak Prescott let me down. I'm so used to it already with his performances in the playoffs. So I guess I'll have to wait another 20 years for Dallas to be relevant in the playoffs. So.
They gave you a shot, though. They left you in it.
Man.
They just kept the door open. I'm like, is this going to be Dak's moment? Pollard getting hurt was huge, though. I really did think that made.
No, that was the end of the game, because if you look, like, Zeke is nowhere close to what he was. I mean, he's a shell. Like, there was times where he had holes and he ran and he got tripped up for like 3-yard gains where that used to be 20-yard gains. So. It was disappointing.
My fantasy football team was well aware of Zeke's inability to, So I had to start him in the flex for about 6 weeks in a row because I had some injuries, and he wasn't the same Zeke that we had come to know and who dominated for so many years. But you know this well, Fish. I mean, running back shelf life in the NFL, not very long.
It's amazing, growing up a Cowboy fan and having Emmitt Smith and watching him. Like he played with separated shoulders, and you see all the carries he took, and it's amazing when you look back at it. It's amazing to see how long he lasted, because it was over a decade in the NFL, which now, 4 years, 5 years is like the shelf life of a running back. So it's crazy.
Yeah, without a doubt. So it should be fun next weekend. I think Joe Shiesty and the Bengals might be a team of destiny, but there are some teams out there too right now that I think will have a say. Obviously, what Brock Purdy's been able to do to keep San Fran afloat and continuing to move forward has been really impressive. Right now, if you guys have to pick a Super Bowl winner, I'm giving you the option to change your mind in a week.
Yeah, I'm not
January 23rd, who's winning it?
Yeah, I think it's the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow has become the new Brady. He's the new Joe Montana. He got there last year. He got a taste in his mouth. I don't think they're going to be. They're just, for them to win yesterday with 3 linemen out, and he continues to play at a high level, and they've got all the pieces. They got the 3. The Cowboys had the 3-headed monster. They have Chase. They have Mixon. They have Burrow. They got a very good defense. I just think they're the team of destiny. He's going to win his first Super Bowl, and it's going to be one of many for him. I think he's the next future of the NFL, and you're going to see a lot of Bengals in the Super Bowls and winning a lot. So they're my pick.
I enjoyed watching the 49ers yesterday. I know they beat your Cowboys, Fish, but I thought the way you are playing with your third string quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy out there. I mean, who would have seen an NFL team get this deep? Because we always talk about the NFL as a quarterback-driven league. Well, is it not an NFL backup quarterback-driven league at times? Because you've got to have a guy who's there in the event of an injury. I mean, the Chiefs had to have Chad Henne there with Patrick Mahomes out for a little while. So I think, what are the Chiefs' prospects if Mahomes can't go? What are the 49ers prospects too? I mean, it's kind of could be a wild weekend.
I think you saw yesterday with Purdy that there are a lot of limitations with him as quarterback. They do shelter him a lot, and he's done a great job. But at some point, all right, those balls are not going to hit somebody in the chest and they're going to drop them. There was interceptions to be made yesterday. The Cowboys did Cowboy things, and But I just think at the end of the day, the best players eventually at that position, Brady did it, Montana did it. Burrow looks like that guy. He just has that confidence about him. He's had it since college. He's a special player. He beat a very, very good Bills team. And I know that I'm a huge Josh Allen fan. I just think he's the guy now. It's every sport has that transition. He got there last year. They should have won the Super Bowl last year. And they've overcome so much on that team this year, especially up front, that having, like I said, 3 offensive linemen out, you would think, oh, there's no way they're going to compete. And they went into a stadium where all the advantages were there for the home team, and they made it seem like they were the home team in that game. And like I said, Cincinnati fans have suffered long enough. I think every team has that time, and this is their time to finally get over the hump. They got no ordinary Joe. So they got the Joe. They have the new Joe Montana in Joe Burrow. So,
yeah, are we sleeping on the Eagles? Are we not giving Jalen Hurts and the Eagles enough credit and enough of a fighter's chance, a puncher's chance to win the Super Bowl?
Well, they'll have a shot if the Bengals don't get any of those linemen back, but you got to think they'll have a couple weeks off, and those guys will be able to get healthy. I think one of them will definitely be out. I think he has like a dislocated kneecap, but it's like I said, they've been there. That experience, you could see their experience from last year has kind of helped them. It's overcome getting through that first time. This is really the Eagles' first run with this group, so it's hard to win that first time. I'm not saying it's impossible because they have the components with their O-line, D-line. They got that run game. They're a very powerful team. Hey, listen, defense wins championships. I know that's an old saying, but it is true. You got to be able to get stops. The Eagles can get stops. I just think Hurts not being there before, that this is his first time, that at some point, just like it is with Purdy, the train stops because of that lack of experience, and you're going to see the benefit of last year, that Bengals going all the way to the Super Bowl. They tasted it. I think those guys are hungry to finish the job that they didn't do last year.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I wouldn't be shocked, though. The only thing I'll say is if the Eagles beat the Niners and are in the Super Bowl, you're talking about Bengals and Eagles potentially with some of the best skill position talent in the NFL, right? Like those two teams have an embarrassment of riches available to them. And I think that's, to your point, Fish, I think that's what's made the Eagles so good. Is, yeah, Jalen Hurts has been playing well, but the guys he's got around him have really stepped up. And I mean, we look at Goddard too at tight end. Like you have so many pieces there at your arsenal.
No, they got the running backs with the running back position set. They also, their wide receivers with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Goddard, the tight end. They're very talented on offense, and they're strong where you need to be. O-line, D-line. That's not the sexy area. We talk about it in recruiting all the time. Fans are into the skill guys, but you win with the guys in the trenches. And the Eagles may be the best team left as far as both, offensive and defensive lines. They're very good. They're deep. They're too deep on the D-line. They could just roll guys in and put pressure on teams. But they're going to be, like I said, they're not going to be an easy out. The Eagles are a tough team. And if there's one team that could, definitely smack the Bengals around and possibly win a Super Bowl, it's the Eagles. I think that I watched the Niners. Dallas had them on the ropes. I just think they're one of those teams that still have some holes. I don't know where they're at. I still think the quarterback situation will get them in trouble this week. But, Eagles, Bengals Super Bowl would be a very good one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Niners getting McCaffrey there in the middle of the season was huge. That was a game changer for them. And speaking of the D-lines, Bob, we were smiling watching Josh Sweat and Derek Nottie go to work this weekend. It hurt me personally to watch Nottie plant Lawrence into the turf. There was probably some Noles, Tigers, old blood there that I'm sure Nottie felt really good about. But cool to see the Seminoles, right? And when you talk too about Asante Samuel, what he did with the Chargers, even though we took care of business, Asante had a nice game there too. So the Noles are showing out in the playoffs here.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's still some really good Seminoles in the NFL, so it's no surprise.
It is fun watching the Chiefs games and hear the war chant. And you see Derek Nottie make a big sack there at the end of the third quarter, and then you hear the war chant go going crazy at Arrowhead. So it's going to be cool. I mean, potentially to see Noddy get to the Super Bowl again, to see Josh Sweat, his incredible story. I mean, almost losing his leg in high school because of that catastrophic injury. And now Josh has diligently made it all the way through Florida State, 3 years here, building a really successful career in Philadelphia. Loves to build computers on the side. If you haven't read those stories about his side hobby of how he loves to, from scratch, build computers, it's a pretty fascinating hobby for Josh Sweat, who's got a lot of, I think, goals and aspirations off the field. So cool story there too.
Yeah, I remember watching Josh Sweat's highlight video in high school, and before his injury, he was probably the most talented defensive end FSU has signed. And when you consider some of the guys, the history from Andre Wadsworth, who was a walk-on and became an All-American and NFL first-round pick, to Jamal Reynolds, to Peter Boulware, he was more talented than all of those guys. And when he got injured, we never really saw glimpses of it at FSU, but you never saw that same level that he was in high school. And that was disappointing because I remember meeting him at FSU on his visit, one of his visits, and he was a great kid. He was physically he was real long, athletic. He had arms that went, it seems like they were like Curious George. They just kept going on and on. His arms, man, he had the longest arms, but it's crazy. Like FSU's had that with a few players where you always wanted more. And he was one of those guys, when you look back at his history at Florida State, that he never lived up to that talent because of that knee injury. And now you're starting to see some of the glimpses of it come back in the NFL. And hopefully he becomes that all-pro, perennial all-pro, and lives up to that potential that he had coming out of Florida State.
For sure. So it'll be cool to keep our eyes on the Noles continuing in the playoffs and Super Bowl picks as of now. We have again our right to change our opinion after next week. So let's talk some recruiting. We got Fish here. Bob, I'll let you take it away as we talk about more on Florida State's weekend in Tallahassee.
Yeah, Fish, I thought you mentioned Jamal Reynolds a couple minutes ago. We saw Jamal this weekend. He had his old Orange Bowl jersey that he got, I guess it was hanging up near the locker room. They gave it to him. He was here because his nephew is now a prospect, a 2026 prospect. But we saw a lot of old friends, Matt Fryer, Todd Fryer, Jamal Reynolds. So we're seeing some old friends who now have family members who are Florida State prospects. So Fish, maybe first let's set the table a little bit. We saw quarterback Luke Kromenhoek was here, running back Cam Davis, Camden Fryer, star receiver from over in Live Oak, Swanee. How good is it to get these three commits back on campus, back here for a junior day, and they can not just continue to be immersed in the program, but they are here to help recruit prospects into this 2024 class?
Yeah, some of your best recruiters are not only the players on the team, but also the guys that you have already committed. Kromenhoek and Cam Davis, he's from Georgia, but Florida State got their hooks in that kid early. He committed as either an 8th grader or a 9th grader, and he's a huge asset. You talk to him, he loves Florida State, and when you discuss recruiting with him, it always goes right back to Florida State. He steers the conversation back to that level. And when guys are bought in and they like the school, they're not even there yet, that makes it easier for them to get that message across to other prospects, other top prospects. You brought up Camden Fryer. FSU has not had a lot of luck recently with the legacy kids. And, Camden's a huge FSU fan. His dad, you go back, you have that memory of him catching the big catch against Miami with Charlie Ward. Those additions are huge because not only are they super talented and these guys can make a big impact at FSU on the field, but now they're making an impact off it with the recruiting. And they're going to be the guys that are going to sell the program to these players. The coaches do their part, but when you could get the help from fellow recruits and players on campus, it makes the coach's job that much easier.
Yeah, I think we met a lot of prospects this weekend, and one of the guys who was really intrigued by his visit, LJ McRae, 3-star edge rusher from Daytona Beach, Mainland. I think he's still kind of kicking the tires on his recruitment. Doesn't sound like he's close to a commitment, but what are your thoughts on LJ?
I mean, if you met him, you understand that this kid is just a totally different looking kid. This is what I talk about when you go out. You don't have to ask who this kid is if you go to watch one of their games. He stands out. He's a very big, tall, long arms, wide shoulders. It wouldn't shock me. I've known his father a long time, that if LJ even ended up as a left tackle down the road, because he has the body to probably get to 295, 300 pounds and put on the weight, I don't think he's going to have any problems getting bigger. He could be a defensive end. He could be a D tackle. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Cam Irvin coming out of high school, about how, his body type, and that eventually he could be on that offensive side. Every time I've seen him, he's got some sort of FSU gear on, or gloves, or he's got the sleeves on or something. It just seems like FSU is definitely one of his top programs that he's going to consider. Being close to Florida State, Daytona Mainland's not that far away. I think they have a good shot. He'll be one, they'll be one of his top 2 or 3 schools, I believe, he chooses from at the end of the day.
Another big visitor was Jarvis Boatwright, defensive back from Clearwater, projected likely as a safety, but we'll see how he kind of plays out. He dropped a top 5 after a junior day visit to Tallahassee, mentioning South Carolina, Florida State, UCF, Tennessee, and Florida. Not really in any particular order, but your thoughts on Jarvis?
Well, Florida State needs safeties. Especially after this year, they're going to lose a couple more guys. Losing Jamie Robinson, they also lost Sam McCall. They need to improve that area of the team. It's probably they've got some parts there for this year, but it's still an area that you always want to get better, especially with all these spread teams that you play. You want guys. Jarvis is a versatile guy in that he could play some nickel, slot corner, probably play safety. You can move him around. So somebody like this would be a great addition to their team. But they need safeties, and he's one of the guys that they've targeted. And if you turn on his film, you could see why. He runs well, and the kid's a very talented football player.
A couple of guys we were talking about this morning. You wanted to mention a guy from Stark Bradford, wide receiver from 2024 class, Khalil Cummings, and defensive back from down Palm Beach Benjamin, Ricky Knight. Tell us a little bit about those guys.
Well, Cummings, the crazy thing is, I don't think Florida State, other than like LaTroy Gwynn, has ever really taken a bunch of kids from Stark, Florida. But, he's another one of those really good athletes. He's a good receiver. He could get open. He could stretch the field. You're starting to see them recruit more of these guys. He could play slot or outside, but he gives you that ability to get down the field and create the big plays. They've got a lot of, they brought in 4 receivers last year from the transfer portal. None of, Johnny's made some big plays, and but it's not the natural thing for him to do. He's a big guy, so he breaks off long runs after catches. But this is a kid that could give them that ability to stretch the field and create those bigger plays. I like him a lot. He's under the radar mainly because of from where he's at. It's not an area that's produced a ton of football players, but he's going to be a good one, and one that Florida State, they're going to probably take 3 or 4 wide receivers this year. He wouldn't be a bad one to take. They already got a really good one in Camden Fryer, so they got at least 3 more spots. He could be one of those guys that fills one of those final 3 spots.
Another hot topic we were hitting on the message board, some folks were asking about linebacker recruiting, and it's a tough spot for Florida State because it hasn't been a great decade of linebackers at Florida State. The last drafted true linebacker at Florida State was Telvin Smith back in 2014 by the Jaguars. Fish, I know a lot of people are excited about Blake Nicholson, what he will bring from Manteca, California to Tallahassee. And of course, excitement about Kalen DeLoach, excitement about Tatum Bethune, the UCF transfer. But how difficult has linebacker recruiting become to evaluate and then develop those guys here at the college level?
I think the tough thing is there's just not a whole lot of them anymore. The spread offenses, especially at the high school level, a lot of teams don't play more than 2 guys out there at linebacker. A lot of the linebackers now, when you see their film, They're playing off the edge. They're trying to rush the passer, get pressure on the passer, or you'll see them line up in the slot. There's not a lot of traditional between the tackle linebackers, guys that play inside the box that are playing downhill, or they play in, they're moving laterally. These guys just don't exist as much anymore. So you look, it's not just a Florida State issue. You go look at the 3 state schools, Florida State, Miami, and Florida. All 3 schools don't have that premier linebacker, that, Derek Brooks type, that Marvin Jones type. It's been a while. Telvin Smith was a 3-star kid that Florida State just happened to hit on. They've been a little unlucky, though, at the linebacker spot. When you look at the League Way kid, they had signed out of Georgia. He ended up transferring to Stanford. He had a decent career. I think he may have gotten a cup of coffee out of the NFL. But you look at some of the other guys, they just haven't hit on that position. They brought in a lot of bodies, but they haven't had a lot of luck. I mean, Deloche has turned himself into a solid player. Tatum Bethune they got from another school. But you go look, there's not a lot of talent at that position on the roster. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's a Florida State issue. It's just you don't see linebackers in high school anymore. Guys don't want to play linebacker. They want to rush the passer or they want to cover somebody. So you don't see guys doing what linebackers have. And you brought up Blake Nicholson. He's a guy that's really more of an athlete, running back, that they're going to have to convert to linebacker. So it's not a natural thing. I like his upside because of the things he does. I always go back to what Butch Davis once told me, that he likes former running backs. You look at the success he had, whether it was a John Beeson or you had Jonathan Vilma played running back in high school. You look at some of the other guys, Alonzo Highsmith, he was one of those guys. But you look, that's something that Florida State has to go out and find these guys that could fit not only their scheme, but learn how to play that position. You see it in the pros. You saw it in the games yesterday. There's not a lot of guys that tackle well in space. Linebackers are almost like the forgotten position. And when you find one, it's almost like a unicorn. Everybody's looking for him. You go look across college football, even Alabama, for all the success they've had at linebacker, they weren't as good as they've been in past years. Outside of Georgia, maybe a few other teams, a lot of teams are looking for guys that could tackle, can take guys down from behind, can get in that backfield and shoot the gaps. That's not a natural thing anymore. And like I said, you go turn on any high school highlight film of most linebackers, you're going to look at a guy that's not doing what you're naturally used to seeing them do. They don't play like they used to. It's just a different thing. So I think Florida State can improve the position by bodies, bringing in multiple guys, and try to maybe take a guy like the kid they got out of Mississippi last year, convert him into a linebacker, because he can hit, but he also has shown the ability to cover. So maybe you find one of those guys that is like that is a little undersized, but you could get him up to about 220 pounds, play linebacker in this game. You don't need 240-pound linebackers anymore, because you're going to ask them to do so much as far as playing in space, covering the flats, covering tight ends, covering running backs, chasing receivers on, it's a different position. So you really almost want to oversign at the safety position, and hopefully one or two of these guys could get bigger and develop into a linebacker.
Yeah, and to some extent, Florida State's done that with Brendan Gant, moved him from safety up to linebacker. Mm-hmm. The old saying, some Florida State coach said it, whether it was Mickey or somebody else, you look for runners and hitters.
Yep.
I think Blake Nicholson is a runner and hitter type. So if you're kind of thinking about a guy who might be a successful linebacker, Blake could develop into just that given time on campus. Wrapping up our recruiting discussion, a lot of good coverage on the Osceola.com. We got live thread, video interviews, stories, photo gallery with a lot of these guys. So if you're trying to match names and faces and get to know these 2024 prospects, we've got a lot of that out there on the Osceola.com. Arya, you want to shift over to basketball? We can talk about a good weekend here as we let Fish get back to business down South Florida.
Absolutely, Fish. You're more than welcome to stick around. If not, we appreciate you, man. Your insights are always, very appreciated, and we're grateful for you.
Now I'm gonna jump off, but you guys, honestly, I want to give you guys props, because these junior days, you guys have been banging that info out, and you guys deserve a lot of credit. It's not as easy as people think. I was doing those 7-on-7s these weekend, and there's so many kids, and you're trying to run and go and do this and that. And I think that people don't realize a lot of times what goes into getting those interviews and getting the content that they want. But you guys did a great job. I'll let you guys talk basketball. I'm not. I'll be divorced if I start talking basketball on these podcasts, man. So you may do me a favor, but I don't know, man. I'll talk to you guys later. So
thanks, Fish. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, moving on into basketball as we wrap up our show. Pitt, Noles. It was from the Peterson Event Center, a place that, Bob, Florida State doesn't win very often historically. But on this day, on Saturday afternoon, Darren Green would not let the Noles lose that basketball game. And Seminoles started pretty hot. Well, I should say they started cold and then got really hot in the middle part of that first half. And then they withstood some runs that the Panthers made in that second half. And I thought they showed a lot of resiliency. And maybe for the first time all year, they showed that they could handle some adversity when it hits.
I think that was a storyline. We were talking to Leonard Hamilton this morning. You know, you've had some big leads this year. I think somebody brought up the Florida game at home when you were up huge, and then that lead evaporated as the Gators pressed and took it to Florida State. But, you know, Florida State having a 10-point lead at the break and then losing it relatively quickly, but having a Darren Green Jr. to kind of steady the having a steadying presence of a veteran. I know Coach Hamilton says they don't have enough veterans. They have a lot of new guys and guys who are still feeling things out. But we've seen when Darren Green Jr. gets hot that he can really be the spark that leads the rest of the team. And really, he was able to pour it on 16 points in the second half. I think also we're now seeing the development of a Chandler Jackson, a Deontay Green, the bench, finally having some of these younger guys come off the bench and just give quality minutes so that Leonard Hamilton doesn't have to say, you have to play 40 minutes, you have to play 38 minutes. I think these guys were drained. Coach Hamilton, Aria, I can't believe he said this, but this morning he said a number of the veterans did not practice in the days leading up to Pitt. They were riding the stationary bikes. They were just keeping conditioning up, but he didn't want to wear guys out. And you have to imagine, it's a long road trip up to Notre Dame. It's a long road trip up to Pittsburgh. That kind of wear and tear on this team, I think, also underscores how cool it is that they came out with 2 wins. Notre Dame's not the Notre Dame of old. That's not going to be a Sweet 16 team. But that Pitt team was pretty fierce, and it's probably the best team Florida State has beaten. So I think what the Seminoles did in that stretch Tuesday through Saturday to travel, to win, to pick up those 2 wins, pretty impressive. And we'll kind of see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I think you nail it. Right. I think this Seminole team, again, has had to show they can handle adversity. They haven't done it well for the most part of the year, but they're starting to build confidence, and they're healthy. And as you mentioned, Bob, that's allowing them to play guys less minutes in a game. You're not seeing Matt Cleveland have to play 40 minutes a night. I think it's allowing Darren Green to be able to be a little more rested. The jump shots can start falling a little bit easier. He was, unbelievable from beyond the arc against Pitt. And he led the team, and the jumpers are falling. Florida State was 10 of 20 from beyond the arc in that game, 50%. And now we see this team, look, they may not reach their end season goals, right? The goal around Florida State is to make an NCAA tournament, and the precedent that Ham has set is to make it to a second weekend. That's just a credit to what he's built, but that's the expectations that he's built. And so they'll probably fall short of that this season of making the tournament. I think at this point, they're going to have to win the ACC tournament to get the auto bid. And that's a really, really hard thing to do. But Bob, if they continue to move up the ACC standings, they could set themselves up for a run, right? Like they could set themselves up to not have to play, 4 or 5 games in 4 or 5 days. And so, maybe some silver linings there as Florida State's now 5-4 in the ACC, just a half game or a game maybe behind Duke and Carolina in the standings. So if I had told you that back in November, you would have laughed at me that FSU at the end of January would be, in the top 10 of the ACC and battling to move forward and push forward. So got to give them a lot of credit, though, Bob. I think it's a testament to the culture that Ham's built that they haven't quit.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it took this team. Leonard Hamilton used to use the term, we can't throw ourselves a pity party. And he's said that a lot in past years. To some extent, did the guys throw a pity party just at all of the injuries and the Baba Miller suspension by the NCAA? Were they just down? Were they just not able to mentally have that right mindset to go out there, work together, build cohesion in November and December? Is that what maybe set this team back just enough? Because you look at some of those losses, I'm not saying I'd like to go back and see Florida State play a Troy or a Siena right now, but I think Florida State has a better shot to win a lot of those games that they lost, a lot of those November type of games that didn't go their way. I'm very curious. I think it's good to be curious about where this team goes. The Seminoles are playing two top 25 teams in Miami and Clemson. We could see both of those games go sideways for the Seminoles, or we could see them battle and show that depth and show that they are more like what they've shown us in the ACC part of the schedule. It's good to be curious about these guys. And I think that's kind of where I am going into these next two games and, going into the last, say, 12 or so games of the regular season.
Yeah. And so they've got an opportunity coming up on Tuesday. And I mean, it's a big one against Miami, 7 p.m. And we listed as, ESPN 1, 2, or U. It's a Netflix game, which means they have, I think today ESPN will figure out where they want to place that. And so keep an eye out. But that's a big game for Florida State, right? Hosting Miami in Tallahassee on Tuesday. Hopefully a big crowd shows up. I think it will be a good crowd. The students should be there at least for the Noles and the Canes. And am I right? Is it 9 straight wins for Florida State in the series over Miami? As Jeff Cameron would say, the Platinum Bohica is on the table. I think that'll get a kick out of some of the fans. I will not tell you what Bohica stands for in the acronym. I'll let you try and figure that out. But Jeff will tell you. Either way, the Noles, 9-game win streak over Miami. Bob, can they make it a 10th? Or is this as big of a gap as we've seen between the Noles and the Canes on the court?
Coach Hamilton was saying that this is the best team that they've played so far. Now, I would respectfully disagree. I mean, you've played Duke, you've played Virginia twice. Miami is loaded with talent now. But I think Florida State's better positioned right now to stay with a Miami, to use that bench, to use Chandler Jackson. We've been asking for a few weeks, when can we see more and more of a Chandler Jackson? We're now seeing it. We're seeing a little bit of Deontay Green. We're seeing a little bit less of Naheem McLeod, who, respectfully has teams that will be better matchups for him. And he might be needed against Miami, but in certain spots. So I think Florida State is in the best position to be facing now 2 ranked teams, Miami on Tuesday, Clemson on Saturday. Home atmosphere for both games should be really, really cool. I think you're right. The students need to come out and really get back into full support to energize this team, because we've seen what they can do, here on the road. Now, what can they do back on the friendly confines of the Tucker Center?
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Obviously, Miami's got, Isaiah Wong and Nigel Pack, and they're really good. They added a lot of transfers. This is a Miami team that I do think can make another deep run into the NCAA tournament. And Jim Larinaga, did a nice job of going into the portal and really revitalizing his team. Something that, Bob Ham said he would look to do this next offseason is to kind of transform a team with that transfer portal, so to speak. And so we'll see. Miami's done it well, and a number of NCAA programs have used it to be able to propel themselves the next year. So Noles and Canes, 9 in a row for FSU against Miami. Last year's FSU Miami game was epic. If you remember, Raekwon Evans, late game heroics to get FSU the win. And then, of course, the game in Coral Gables where the Noles were up like 20 plus, right? And Miami comes storming back and had the ball to win it at the end, and the Noles held on by 1. So a couple of nail biters between the Seminoles and the Hurricanes on the hardwood, and we'll see if this one is any different. The Noles have played much better at home this season than on the road, but this is as much confidence as I think FSU has had playing basketball. The way Cleveland has stepped up as of late, Mills is always a threat to go off for 20 on a given night. Jalen Worley has been playing much steadier and within himself. You mentioned Chandler Jackson's confidence, And Baba Miller makes a difference. I think you are seeing just being on the court, even if it's not, fully polished and up to speed yet, getting back into game shape. He had a jab step 3 from that right wing against Pitt at 6'11" that was pretty breathtaking. And then he had the power through up and under move that he it was like a little floater runner. I couldn't believe it at 6'11" that he has that agility. And I think we're all starting to be acquainted with what Baba Miller can do. And obviously before the season's over, I think we'll see one really, really big game, if not more than one, from Baba and the talent that he possesses. And then, of course, Darren Green has been playing really well too, of course, as of late. So this Seminole team's not the same team that it was in November. I really, really don't believe that they are. And yeah, they lost to Virginia last week, at home. I do wonder what that game's like if Baba's not out with tonsillitis. I really do wonder. I'm not saying it would have been a win. I think it would have been a nail biter down the stretch for FSU at home against the Cavaliers. So give the Noles a shout out. They're playing hard, 2 in a row, 5-4 now in the ACC, and they continue to try and, ruin some people's seasons. I mean, spoilers fun too. I think it can be fun to be the villain. So let's see what the Seminoles do Tuesday night in Tallahassee. Again, ESPN hasn't designated that on which of those 3 channels that they'll put it on, ESPN 1, 2, or U. But I think Anif Shroff and Corey Alexander will be on the call for that one. And then yours truly will be on the call Saturday against Clemson on ACC Network. So I'm very, very excited about the opportunity to call a conference game on ACC Network. And Clemson's playing really well right now too. Top 20 team. So big week for FSU in Tallahassee. 2 top 20 teams come into the Tuck, and see if Leonard Hamilton can continue to make statements, right, Bob? It's a staple of Leonard's teams to get better as seasons wind and go into the month of February into March. They do improve. And so we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think they played their best basketball in March. They may not have a long March this year, but will they play some of their best basketball in January and February? Will they develop some of these younger kids? Like you said, Baba Miller is a guy who I think we will see flourish. I think a lot of people might have expected too much too soon from Baba, but the NBA scouts are kind of salivating already over what he has shown them just in small glimpses here and there. And yeah, we're going to kind of see Baba build towards something. It's going to be a more steady progress out of Baba. I'll be curious, Tuesday and Saturday, how many NBA scouts are going to be there at the Tuck because they want to check out just a collection of talent, not just the Florida State guys, but Baba, Matthew Cleveland, his progress over these last 9 games, those 8 straight doubles.
He's probably a second-round pick right now, Bob. I think he's moved himself into that second-round discussion of the NBA draft.
Yeah, and I don't think we could have said after his freshman year that Matt was a guy who was ready, even though he was the 6th man of the ACC. He didn't look ready for the NBA. But now the way he's been assertive going after rebounds, and it hurts that it took Cam Fletcher's injury to sort of prompt that within Matthew. I don't mean that as a criticism, but he did take the opportunity to say, I've got to do this. I've got to be that guy that my team can depend on, not just for scoring, but for rebounding. I think that's really cool. That's something that should be applauded. I think the NBA scouts will say, we did not see this last year. We're seeing it now. What will he show us next year when he's maybe a 2-way player? Maybe he's a G League NBA guy. So we'll see. But again, I think it's going to be cool to see how many scouts are there. They're always kind of watching for those diamonds in the rough. And Matthew's no longer a diamond in the rough. He's a guy that we both think really has a long future in professional basketball.
Yeah, let me tell you this right now, Bob. Matt Cleveland from 3 this season, 43%.
And he was a guy in high school, right, who will admit his jump shot was his weakness. He was not a natural-born jump shooter. He's not a Darren Green Jr., right out of the box. I think that's to be applauded too. We are seeing significant improvements statistically, but also optically when you watch a guy like Matthew Cleveland.
Yeah, and running that graphic there, for you guys just to kind of see it. 14 points per game, 8 rebounds a game. For the people that don't think Matt Cleveland's an NBA draft pick right now, pretty good size, kind of showing you he can shoot. He'll rebound. He plays good defense, scoring the ball. And he had a couple of moves that I think you check off that list. If you're a scout on Saturday against Pitt, where I think he hit a couple of fadeaway jumpers. Did you notice that? Back to the basket, fadeaway jumpers. And that's an NBA caliber move there. And when you look at, the 43% from beyond the arc, it's not a big sample size. I think he's only attempted 30 of them. He's showing you enough. And I see his free throw percentage is nearly 70% now. So Cleveland's starting to show you that he can play at the next level. And so he'll have a decision to make, I think, at the end of the season on whether he wants to come back or start his professional career. But no doubt, I think in a season in which a lot has been forgettable, the silver lining has been seeing Cleveland take a next step. He has progressed into one of the stars in the ACC. And I think he's got a shot to be an all ACC pick for the end of the year. I don't know if that'll be second or third team, but it might be an honorable mention. But Cleveland has worked his way into that conversation. So good on him. Shout out, by the way, FSU women's hoops ranked. Have only been trying to start the rally in the campaign for them to be ranked for about a month now. Florida State 18-4. Brooke Wyckoff's team gets rewarded with a top 25 ranking, and they win 2 games this week, beating Virginia on the road and then Pitt in Tallahassee on Sunday. So they've got a big week coming up too, Bob. They play at Notre Dame, top 10 team on Thursday night, and that's going to be a hostile environment at Purcell Pavilion. And the Irish are phenomenal. And then on Sunday, they play Carol Lawson's Duke Blue Devils, who are also, I believe, a top 15 team right now. I've got to go back and look at the rankings to double check, but big week for men's hoops, big week for women's hoops. The Noles, Bob, are inching closer to potentially even hosting some of the NCAA tournament in that first weekend on the women's side.
Yeah, I think, as you're watching the Sunday game, it wasn't very competitive. Hate it for Lance White, and he hasn't been able to build Pitt into what he wanted when he left Florida State as an assistant coach back in 2018. But Florida State dominated a team that they were supposed to. And the Seminoles, who were projected, I believe it was 9th in the ACC women's preseason poll, now, like you said, in position, ranked in the top 25 in the net. I believe they're 15, 16 in the NCAA's net rankings. So if the net is, as a lot of people say, more important than the AP or the coaches poll, how much does the net factor into, do you get to host a regional or not? I think Michael Alford will go to bat for the program and say, we want to host. He'll put in a very competitive bid for Tallahassee to host a 14 regional, which would be pretty cool for Brooke Wyckoff's first true year as the head coach, not counting that one COVID season. For Brooke to do that, coming off a year where they lost so many transfers, I think that would be pretty remarkable. I think they would really appreciate and feel well rewarded for their efforts that they get to host a regional. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, come on out and support the Seminoles on the hardwood this week. You've got 3 home games between the men and the women this week, Tuesday and then Saturday, Sunday. So basketball playing much better. I think the ladies deserve some support this weekend as well. And should be a lot of fun. So kudos to Brooke Wyckoff's team and Leonard Hamilton's team as well right now. So a great show, Bob. I think we touched on just about everything. NFL talk, a little bit of football, recruiting, men's, women's hoops. And we appreciate those of you watching on YouTube, again, Facebook, and on Twitter. And appreciate those who commented. And you can do that, interact with us. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as the Osceola.com. This will be available on podcasts everywhere here in just a couple of hours. For Charles Fishbein, who joined us earlier, Bob Ferranti, I'm Ari Masudi. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.